You've definitely seen the iconic images, right? Maybe even dreamed of walking on those ancient stones yourself. But how much do you really know about the Great Wall of China, beyond the usual postcards? We often picture this one massive, continuous structure, maybe built by a single emperor, standing strong forever. Today, we're doing a deep dive, trying to find a shortcut into the really complex and honestly, endlessly fascinating story of this incredible structure. Our mission is to dig up those surprising facts, those key bits of knowledge that go past the common myths. We want to help you grasp the real depth of its legacy.
Yeah, and this deep dive is a great chance for you to get properly informed about this world landmark, and quickly, too. We'll move beyond those familiar stories to look at its layered history, from how it started in fragments right up to what it symbolizes today. We'll try to understand its changing purpose and just the sheer human effort behind it all.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. The story of the Great Wall. It's not just one simple tale. Its origins actually go back way back, over 2,000 years. This was long before China was even unified. You have to imagine separate warring states, and each one is building its own walls for protection against rivals and nomadic groups.
Right. And what's really interesting here is how the idea for a single unified defense system came about. It wasn't really until Qin Shi Huang, he was the very first emperor of a unified China, ruling from about 221 to 210 BCE, that these separate older walls were first linked up. He ordered huge sections to be connected, often using forced labor, mind you. This formed the early outline, the ambitious beginning of what we now call the Great Wall. That was the foundation, really. It set the scene for centuries more building.
Huh. So the massive stone wall we usually picture, the one winding over mountains, that's not what Emperor Qin's workers were building back then. What kind of materials were they actually working with in those early centuries?
Oh, not at all, no. Back then, a lot of it was made from tamped earth, wood, and rough stones, basically whatever they could find locally. Tamped earth, or hangtu as it's called, was actually a pretty smart technique. They packed down layers of soil, gravel, sometimes straw, really intensely. It created these incredibly dense, surprisingly tough walls that could hold up against early siege tactics. It was only over many, many centuries, with later dynasties like the Han, the Northern Wei, and especially the Ming Dynasty, that it was gradually rebuilt, strengthened, and transformed into the amazing stone and brick structure we recognize in the famous parts today. And this evolution, well, it brings up a key point. Its purpose also changed and grew over time.
Okay, so the main purpose, that seems pretty clear, doesn't it? Defense. For ages, China's biggest, most persistent threats always came from the north, from the steppes.
Absolutely. In the really ancient times, you had the Xiongnu. They were this powerful group of nomadic tribes from the Eurasian steppes, a huge concern. Their cavalry raids were, well, a serious threat to agricultural China. And later, of course, the Mongols became dominant, eventually even conquering China. So the wall definitely provided a physical barrier, a big obstacle, yeah, and a vital communication line. Soldiers used this clever system, smoke signals during the day, fire beacons at night. They relayed messages from tower to tower, warning about enemy movements over huge distances. Sometimes news of an attack could travel hundreds of kilometers in just hours. Pretty amazing.
Wow. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. Its job went way beyond just keeping people out, didn't it? It seems like it shapes Chinese society itself and how it dealt with the rest of the world.
Exactly. If we kind of zoom out, look at the bigger picture. The wall also worked as a really smart multi-purpose border control system. It was central for managing the flow of people and goods along the famous Silk Road. You can picture specific checkpoints where traders had to pay taxes on things like silk, tea, porcelain, spices, and let the government collect duties, control illegal trade, and even manage who was coming into and leaving ancient China. So essentially, it acted as both a physical shield and this complex active checkpoint, a filter, really, for trade, culture, people. It helped define the very edges of Chinese civilization. Not just a wall, but a tool for state control and economic power, too.
Right. Okay. Now let's talk about the scale, the sheer size of this thing. When you add up all the different sections built by all those dynasties over thousands of years, what are we actually looking at in terms of size?
The scale is, well, it's genuinely hard to wrap your head around. If you count all its branches and sections, the Great Wall stretches over 21,000 kilometers.
Hmm.
Just to give you some perspective, that's more than half the circumference of the entire Earth. And it's not a straight line, obviously. It snakes and twists through this incredible range of tough landscapes, huge mountains, empty deserts, river valleys, wide plains. As an engineering project, it's truly one of the most ambitious, most sustained building efforts in all of human history.
Building something that enormous across terrain like that, it must have taken an almost unbelievable amount of manpower. What was the human cost? What was it like for the people actually building it?
Oh, absolutely. Historians figure that millions of workers were involved over its long history. And it was a grim mix. Soldiers, yes, but also peasants forced into service, even criminals sent into exile. The conditions were just brutal. Harsh weather, back-breaking labor, disease was everywhere. It's quite sobering to think how many lives were lost building it. There are these haunting old stories, legends really, that suggest bodies were actually buried inside the wall. That's where its dark nickname comes from, the longest cemetery on Earth. So the
Mhm.
wall isn't just a symbol of imperial might, but also of incredible human sacrifice.
Wow. And those really famous parts we see today, the well-preserved sections with the impressive brickwork and all the watchtowers, which dynasty was mainly behind those?
Ah, yes. Those parts you instantly recognize. They were mostly built during the Ming Dynasty. That's between the 14th and 17th centuries. Now, this period was really key because China had lived through the trauma of the Mongol conquest, figures like Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan. So the Ming emperors, after they kicked out the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty, were absolutely set on making sure a foreign invasion like that could never happen again. They didn't just patch up the old wall, they basically reinvented it. They built much stronger, more advanced sections using durable stone and bricks. And they cleverly integrated this complex network of watchtowers, big barracks for troops, strong fortresses, and those crucial beacon towers for signals. These towers weren't just lookouts, they were like mini forts themselves, places to store weapons, food, house soldiers. They made the whole system much more effective.
Okay, so putting it all together, what does this mean for its lasting importance? The Great Wall clearly became more than just a military wall, right? It turned into something much bigger.
It absolutely did. Over the centuries, it grew into this really powerful, complex symbol for Chinese civilization itself. I mean, just imagine a structure that huge, visibly marking out such a vast territory, all built by hand. It came to stand for the immense strength, the resilience, the sort of sheer determination of the Chinese people to protect their culture and survive. It also symbolized their incredible ability to organize and carry out these enormous projects that lasted for generations. It was like a psychological border, too, defining East China versus the barbarian lands outside.
Right, even though, as you said, it couldn't always stop every single invasion the Mongols got through eventually, and later the Manchus too, it still stood as this powerful symbol of resistance, a physical representation of their national identity and their long fight for control over their own destiny.
And that leads us to the deeply human stories that are tangled up with it. The Great Wall is tied to some really moving myths and legends that show the human drama behind it all. One of the most famous and saddest is the story of Meng Jiangnu. Her husband was forced to work on the wall and died from exhaustion, just worked to death. So she travels a long way to bring him winter clothes, finds out he's dead, and she weeps so hard. The legend says her grief was so powerful that a section of the wall actually collapsed, revealing his body so she could bury him properly.
Wow, stories like that, they really bring home the immense human cost, don't they? They remind us that behind those imposing stones, there are millions of forgotten lives, huge sacrifices, and powerful emotions that still give the wall meaning today.
Exactly. And makes you think, doesn't it? How does a monument created out of such hardship and strategic need continue to shape a nation's identity centuries down the line?
Which brings us neatly to the Great Wall now. How much of it is actually left after all this time? What's its status today? Is it all still standing strong, or are big parts just crumbling?
Well, not all of it has survived, unfortunately. Time, weather, human activity, they've taken their toll. Many parts have eroded, collapsed, or just disappeared into the landscape. But there are beautifully restored sections, like Battling and Mutianyu near Beijing. Those are the ones most people visit. And they get millions of tourists every year. They give you a real sense of its past grandeur. And it's rightly recognized, of course, as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Plus, it's often listed as one of the seven wonders of the medieval world, so its place in global history is secure.
Okay, but what about that old saying, the one everyone repeats? You can see the Great Wall from space. Is there any truth to that, or is it just one of those myths that sounds cool but isn't real?
Ah, yes, the space myth. It's a powerful image, but yeah, it's largely a myth. Apparently, it's extremely difficult, probably impossible, to see the wall with the naked eye from Earth orbit. It's just too narrow, and it tends to blend in with the ground colors. But that being said, its sheer scale, when you're on the ground, seeing it stretch across those dramatic landscapes, it's still absolutely mind-blowing. Seeing it snake over mountains and deserts really speaks to the vision and sheer grit of the builders.
So when we wrap all this up, the fragmented start, the dual purpose, the immense human effort, the symbolic weight, why does the Great Wall of China still resonate so much today? What's its lasting legacy for you?
I think it matters so much because it's not just bricks and mortar, is it? It's a living story. It's a story of defense, yes, but also of ingenuity, of cultural power, and the incredible human drive to build something lasting, something bigger than oneself, something that endures for millennia. It's a reminder, too, that history isn't just made by emperors and generals, but by the millions of ordinary people whose hands actually laid every single stone. And ultimately, today, it stands as this powerful, enduring symbol of China's strength, its incredible resilience, and its deep, unbroken connection to its ancient past.
So the next time you see a picture of the Great Wall, maybe remember it's so much more than just a place tourists go. It's really a living monument to human history, to ambition, resilience, identity, stretching over 21,000 kilometers, a defining symbol of a civilization that's lasted more than 2,000 years.
Yeah. What really strikes you about that blend, how it managed to be both a hard physical barrier and such a deep cultural statement? Maybe it's worth thinking about how the huge human cost behind grand projects like this often ends up shaping their legacy, making them even more symbolic rather than taking away from it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of the world's truly incredible structures. Until next time, keep digging deeper.